My new manager tried to sabotage my $400K bonus. He didn't know he'd destroy the whole company. I need to get this off my chest, because I still can't believe I watched it happen in real time. My manager tried to torch my $400,000 bonus out of pure jealousy, and he ended up torching the company that signed his paycheck too. I'm not exaggerating. I have the emails. I have the Slack messages. I have a resignation letter I never got to use because there was nothing left to resign from. Let me back up. I'm 34. I've spent the last 9 years in enterprise sales, the last 6 of them at a mid-sized supply chain software company I'll call Verdant Systems. Not the real name, obviously, but close enough that anyone who worked there will know exactly who I'm talking about. I was the account executive on our single biggest client, a logistics conglomerate I'll call Halbrook Freight. Halbrook was not just our biggest client. Halbrook was 41% of our annual revenue. One client, 41%. If that number makes your stomach drop a little, hold that feeling because it's about to matter a lot. I built that relationship from nothing. 6 years ago, Halbrook was a $200,000 a year pilot contract with a skeptical VP who thought our software was a nice toy. I flew to their Ohio headquarters 11 times in 18 months. I learned their internal politics better than I knew my own company's org chart. I knew which regional director hated PowerPoint and which one wouldn't sign anything without a printed one-pager. By year 4, Halbrook was a $9 million annual contract, and I was the only person at Verdant who had real relationships on their side, not just contacts, relationships. Their VP of operations, a woman named Renata, used to call my cell phone directly, not the sales line, my actual cell phone, because she trusted me more than she trusted our support team. This year, Halbrook was up for a massive renewal and expansion. Not just renewing the existing contract, expanding into a new division, warehouse automation, that would have taken the account from $9 million to somewhere around $22 million a year. My commission structure on a deal that size, plus the accelerator kickers for landing a new division, worked out to just north of $400,000. That was my bonus, not a hypothetical, not a stretch goal. It was in my comp plan, signed by my old VP of sales in writing before he left the company in March. That's when Derek came in. Derek was hired as the new VP of sales in April, brought in from a competitor, and from week 1 he had a chip on his shoulder about me the size of Ohio itself. I want to be fair here, new leadership often wants to shake things up, prove they're not just coasting on the last guy's wins. I got that. What I didn't get was why he seemed to specifically resent that I had the Halbrook relationship, and he didn't. At my first one-on-one with him, he looked at my comp plan on his screen, actually laughed a little, and said, $400K for one renewal. That's not how we're going to do things going forward. I said the contract predates him, and it was signed off by the CEO. He said, we'll see. I should have known right there. We'll see from a new manager about an already signed comp agreement is never good news. Over the next 6 weeks, Derek started doing something I can only describe as slow-motion sabotage, except he was doing it so clumsily, so nakedly out of spite, that it took me a while to realize how dangerous it actually was, not just to me, to the whole company. First, he tried to insert himself into the Halbrook relationship. He scheduled a call with Renata without me on it, to build his own rapport as the new VP, he said. I found out about it after the fact from Renata herself, who called me confused, asking why some guy named Derek had emailed her cold, CCing his own boss. Using a tone she described as kind of aggressive, honestly, pushing for a faster signature on the new division contract than the timeline we'd already agreed on. Renata does not like being pushed. I'd spent 4 years teaching her partners at Verdant not to push her. Derek undid that in one email. I smoothed it over. I called Renata, apologized on behalf of the company without throwing Derek under the bus, and got us back on track. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, Derek pulled me off the lead role on the expansion deal entirely. Just for this final stretch, he said. I want to make sure I'm visible to leadership on our biggest account, and put himself as the primary point of contact for the final contract terms. I pushed back hard. I told him directly in a meeting with witnesses, that this was a mistake, that Halbrook's trust was built on a specific relationship, and that inserting an unfamiliar face this late in an active, high-stakes negotiation was going to spook a client that was already famously risk-averse about vendor changes. He told me I was being territorial and that no client relationship is bigger than the company. Ironic, considering what happened next. Here's the part where the story turns, and where I need you to understand something about Halbrook that Derek clearly never bothered to learn. Halbrook doesn't just buy software. Halbrook signs multi-year exclusivity riders. Buried in our master service agreement, the original one I negotiated 4 years earlier, was a clause that said if Verdant made material changes to designated account leadership without client sign-off during an active renewal window, Halbrook had the right to trigger an early exit clause with 0 penalty. I knew about this clause because I wrote half of it myself, specifically to protect the relationship from exactly this kind of internal reshuffling. Derek never read it. Derek, in 6 weeks on the job, had not once opened the full master service agreement for our largest account. So when Derek unilaterally sent Renata a revised final contract, one where he'd quietly restructured the pricing tiers to look better on his own numbers for the quarter, without running it by me, without running it by legal, without understanding that Renata's team had already verbally agreed to a completely different structure with me 2 weeks earlier, Renata didn't just push back. Renata's team invoked the exit clause. I found out on a Tuesday morning. I was in the middle of pulling together QBR slides when I got a Slack message from someone in legal asking, and I quote, "Did you know Halbrook just sent formal notice they're exercising early termination rights on the master agreement?" I did not know. Derek had not looped me in on any of it. I opened my inbox and there it was, a letter from Halbrook's general counsel, cold and formal, citing the exact clause I'd written myself. Terminating the entire $9 million contract effective in 90 days, with the $22 million expansion, the one my $400K bonus was tied to, dead on arrival. I want to be honest about the next hour of my life. I sat at my desk and I did not move. My hands were shaking. 9 years of building this career, 4 years of building this specific relationship. And Derek had unraveled it in 6 weeks because he wanted his name on the deal more than he wanted the deal to actually close. But here's what I didn't understand yet, sitting there in shock. I thought this was a disaster for me. I thought I'd just watched my bonus disappear. I had no idea I was watching the beginning of something much, much bigger. Word travels fast in a company that size, and by Thursday of that week, the whispers were already turning into something louder. See, Halbrook wasn't just 41% of our revenue. Halbrook was collateral. 8 months earlier, our CEO had taken out a growth loan from a private equity lender to fund an acquisition. And the loan covenant, the fine print nobody outside finance ever reads, required Verdant to maintain a minimum revenue floor tied specifically to material client concentration, which was lender speak for, if Halbrook leaves, you're in default. I didn't know any of this at the time. I found out because our CFO, a guy named Marcus who I'd worked with closely over the years on deal structuring, called me directly, not to yell at me, but almost to warn me. He said, "Please tell me there's a way to walk this back. If Halbrook actually leaves, we trip the loan covenant and the lender has the right to call the entire loan due immediately. The entire loan, $14 million, due immediately. A company our size does not have $14 million sitting around waiting to be called." I told Marcus everything. I told him about Derek inserting himself into the relationship, the unauthorized pricing change, the fact that I had begged, in a meeting with witnesses, not to do exactly what he did. Marcus went pale, I could hear it in his voice even over the phone, and said, "I need you to send me that in writing, today." I did. I sent a full timeline, every email, every Slack message. Every date. I am not a vindictive person by nature, but I want to be honest. Part of me sent that email because I was furious and I wanted the truth on the record. The other part of me sent it because I genuinely thought leadership needed to know how close we were to catastrophe before it got worse. It got worse anyway. Derek, instead of trying to quietly repair the relationship, or at least own what he'd done, decided his best move was to go around me and go around Marcus and go straight to our CEO with his own version of events. A version where I was the one who had mismanaged client expectations for years, and his fresh approach had simply surfaced pre-existing problems in the account. He tried to get ahead of the story by making it my failure instead of his. This is the part where, if this were a movie, you'd want to throw something at the screen. Because for about 5 days, it actually worked. I got called into a meeting with our CEO and our chief revenue officer, and I could tell from the tone in the room that Derek's framing had landed first. I sat there and very calmly walked them through the actual documented timeline. I had the receipts. Literally, screenshots, timestamps, the meeting notes where I'd warned him in front of 2 other directors. I laid it all out without raising my voice once, because I have spent 9 years learning that in rooms like that, the person who stays calm is the person who gets believed. The CEO went quiet. The CRO went quiet. And then the CEO asked Marcus to confirm the loan covenant language, and Marcus confirmed it live in that meeting. If Halbrook's termination becomes final, Verdant is in default within 90 days. I watched the color drain out of the CEO's face in real time. What happened over the following 2 weeks was, frankly, one of the most brutal things I've ever witnessed in a professional setting. And I've watched a lot of ugly things happen in 9 years of sales. Leadership scrambled to save the Halbrook relationship. I was put back in the lead seat, too late, in my opinion. But I took the call anyway because a small part of me still believed the relationship I'd built over 4 years could survive one bad month. I flew to Ohio myself, on a Saturday, unpaid, because I needed to sit across from Renata in person. I won't pretend that meeting was easy. She was polite but cold in a way I'd never experienced from her before. She said, and I remember this almost word for word, "I liked working with you. I don't like feeling like I was a rounding error to someone who doesn't know how to read a contract he didn't write." She wasn't talking about me. She meant Derek. But the damage to the relationship, to the trust, was already done, and no amount of apologizing from me could undo 6 weeks of Derek's carelessness. Halbrook did not reverse the termination. 90 days later, on schedule, exactly as the letter had said, the contract ended. $9 million in annual revenue gone. The $22 million expansion gone with it. And 30 days after that, right on schedule too, the private equity lender exercised its right under the covenant and called the $14 million loan due in full. Verdant Systems did not have $14 million. I want to tell you the ending felt like justice in a clean, satisfying way, but the truth is messier than that, and I think you deserve the honest version, not the neat one. The company went into a rushed, humiliating emergency sale process. A larger competitor bought Verdant's remaining assets and client contracts for pennies on the dollar, mostly just to absorb what was left of our customer base. 340 people lost their jobs in a single week. 340. People who had nothing to do with Derek's ego. People in support and engineering and finance who had built careers there. Gone. Because one man could not stand the idea of someone else having a bigger bonus than his own numbers looked good. Derek was fired first, 2 weeks before the acquisition closed, in a meeting I was not in but heard about from 3 different people within the hour. The story that spread, and I did not spread it, I want to be clear, other people did. Because the documentation was already sitting in half a dozen inboxes by then, was that Derek's unauthorized contract change, and his attempt to bury the timeline had directly triggered the loan. Default that ended the company. He didn't get a severance package. He got escorted out with a cardboard box, in an industry small enough that everyone in enterprise SaaS sales in the Midwest knew his name within a month, and not in the way he wanted. I was one of the last people offered a role at the acquiring company, mostly because Renata, of all people, personally vouched for me during the transition and made it a condition that I stay on as her point of contact if they wanted to keep any of Halbrook's business at all. It wasn't the $400,000 bonus. That deal was dead, gone, buried with the rest of the old contract. But I kept my job when 340 other people didn't, and I think about that every single day. Some nights I don't feel lucky at all. I feel like I watched a slow-motion car crash that I tried, repeatedly in writing, on the record, to stop. And nobody with the power to stop it listened until it was already too late. Update, 3 months later a few of you asked me to come back and update once the dust settled, so here it is. The acquiring company kept me on, and I'm slowly rebuilding what's left of the Halbrook relationship, though it will never again be what it was. Renata and I still talk, but there's a formality there now that wasn't there before. Trust like that, once it cracks, doesn't fully reset, no matter how many good meetings you have afterward. Marcus, the CFO, left the industry entirely. Last I heard, he took a much smaller role somewhere with, in his words, boring, predictable clients and zero private equity involvement. I don't blame him one bit. And Derek, I debated even including this part, because it feels almost too fitting, but it's true, so here it is. 6 weeks ago, I got a LinkedIn message from a recruiter asking if I'd be willing to do a reference call for a Derek, redacted, who listed me as a former direct report on his resume, applying for a VP of sales role at another company. I want you to sit with that for a second. He listed himself as having reported to me, not the other way around. I didn't respond with anger. I didn't need to. I just wrote back 3 sentences. Factual, unemotional, exactly the kind of calm tone that got me believed in that CEO's office months earlier. I told the recruiter the reporting structure was inaccurate, and that I'd be happy to speak to specifics of the Halbrook account timeline if it would be useful to their due diligence. I never heard whether he got the job. Something tells me he didn't. I still have the $400,000 number saved in a note on my phone, not because I'm chasing it. Because some mornings, I need the reminder that staying calm, keeping receipts, and telling the truth in writing is worth more than any bonus a company can put on paper. Because when everything else collapses, that's the only thing that's still standing.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want more fascinating Reddit tales, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to Archives of Reddit. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.